Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane. You know, Don's had quite a career in radio and television, where he's been an air personality, a news anchor, even a TV weatherman.
And John has been a college professor. He's written several books, and he's been an editor and features writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper.
We first teamed up for a radio show in college. On one show, we introduced a soothing musical interlude.
But we stumbled, and it came out Musical Innertube.
And that became the name for this podcast, where we talk with interesting people about their interesting lives, difference makers who really make a difference.
One of the things that John and I love is baseball. And here's a person who also loves baseball. And the three of us are hurting right now because there is no baseball, or it looks like there's not going to be baseball on time in 2022. And that's Sweeny Murti, who works for WFAN, the fan radio in New York, and also does some work with the New York Yankees. Hi, Sweeny. How are you doing this morning?
Wonderful, guys. How are you?
We're fine. Great. And Sweeny, you know, since we're talking about baseball, let's start off right away by asking the big question that's on everybody's mind today, sports-wise. How about that Super Bowl?
Yeah. Usually end up after the game, say, okay, time for baseball. And I woke up today and it was 9 degrees out, football's over, and there's no baseball. But I was telling a friend of mine about the game this morning. I said, after sleeping on it for a night, I said, all right, here's my synopsis. It was a good game because it was a close game. It was far from a classic, and it was really not all that well played. It wasn't played at a championship level. It happened to be exciting because it was a close game and somebody made a play in the final minute. So that's cool.
Yeah. Is it my imagination, or after a couple of decades of being a sports non-entity almost, the Super Bowl really has had a greater number of close fought, exciting games in the last couple of decades. You know what I mean? It used to be a pretty boring, one-sided affair for most of it, but now it's changed. There have been last-second interceptions, last-minute drives, like the one last night, which was actually pretty classic. That was the one part of the game I thought was exciting, that 15-play drive or something. But is it my imagination, or has the Super Bowl gotten better in general?
I mean, I think when you only had 20 of them to base your opinion on, and you off the top of your head, you can come up with 5 or 6 blowouts. You're like, oh, well, I guess I don't think that's been the general rule. I think there were always some really good games in there, and some historic ones. I mean, you didn't have a lot of classic finishes, and then all of a sudden you went through a bunch of them, and that probably makes it stand out more. But I mean, I don't know if I'd call it any different than, say, like, World Series, for example. You get a couple of 4 or 5 game blowouts, or 6 game series that is okay, and I mean, everyone can't be a classic, I guess.
No, that's right.
You just kind of watch for what it is, and certainly the memorable ones now stick out because we're watching the replays every. You can watch replays on your phone 5 seconds later, and there's a lot of different twists and turns in this day and age.
Absolutely. I guess if there were going to be pitchers and catchers reporting, it'd be like next week or something, right? But
I hadn't made any travel reservations because there didn't seem to be any reason to. But I think they were probably going to be reporting this week.
Oh, my goodness.
16th.
Yeah.
It's spread out usually over several days for different teams. But I think the 6th, like this week, 16th, 17th.
Wow.
We're probably going to be the days that people report. It's not usually this close to the Super Bowl, but the Super Bowl is a week later than it used to be. So that's why it feels like it's on top of each other.
And I'm wondering now, they're talking about the end of February is a day when this whole contract or collective bargaining agreement has to be solved before they can actually have a regular season, because they think the minimum number of weeks that they want to have for spring training to get ready is 4. Is that right?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of figures you can get 4 full weeks in, you'll at least get players ready, and even if pitchers aren't, pitchers are typically 6 weeks and you stretch them out, but if they're kind of working out, you can kind of ramp up a little bit and get close to being ready. I mean, 4 weeks is doable, and you'll get some, so you'll start to feel the pressure, I think, as you get, you have 2 weeks left in February, right? So you get another week in here, and you kind of want to start to see some of these, at least some movement on some of these big issues, and say, okay, maybe there's some hope here. But yeah, I think once you get closer to the end of the month, and March 1st is right here, and that means that you're 4 weeks away from the start of the season, then you're going to be kind of jeopardizing that. And I think that's kind of the magic date. Nothing ever happens until there's a deadline. And
right.
That's that's just normal. It happens in contract negotiations all the time with individuals, and collective bargaining is no different. Listen, there's probably a lot of natural procrastinators who waited to write their term paper till the night before and then listening to this. So I think we all know what kind of pressure a deadline.
Yeah, when I was working for the Senate in Pennsylvania, the senators always and all politicians always waited until the last minute to pass a budget. That was always their big thing. The budget was due at the end of June because the fiscal year started July 1st. And we had some, signings of budgets at 11:59.
Yeah.
And I asked a senator once, why do we wait this long when we have months and months and months to negotiate it? And he said, did you ever get a term paper done on time?
Yeah, there you go. Huh?
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's pretty much what it is. What are some of the big issues that are holding this back?
It's funny. I was just talking about this with my friend Tyler Kepner, who writes for the New York Times, who's a big Simpsons fan. Are either of you guys fans of The Simpsons?
Oh yeah,
sure, of course.
Well,
don't have a cow, man.
Yeah, go back to like early Simpsons when Apu is trying to become a U.S. citizen, and in the citizenship test, he's asked, what was the cause of the Civil War, and he starts saying, well, there are many causes of the Civil War, and he starts rattling off 4 or 5, and the guy says, just say slavery. And so, okay, slavery, and that's your one answer, right? So, in the last week or two, when people start asking me, what are the big issues? I'm like, well, do you really want to know, or should I just say money? Because that's it. Okay. And they say, is it really just about money? And I start to say, well, there's this with the players, and there's this with the teams, there's this. And yeah, let's just go with money. That's the easy answer.
Well, that for our listeners at home, it's hard to imagine that we're talking millions of dollars, and even people who first come into the league, are making a fairly good wage, especially considering what they're doing, which is playing, a game on a very high level, certainly. But this is, people are making a lot of money in ways that most of us will never see it. So it's hard to see, for some people at least, it's hard to see baseball players as a class of working class people, if you know what I mean.
Well, sure, but I think you have to understand that. This is their profession. This is not something they play in their backyard. This is not something they do while they drink a few beers and hang out. And this is not something they did. They're not 12 years old and 15 years old doing it. This is their job, and they are the best ones at it. If you don't understand that, think about, if you're a Phillies fan and Bryce Harper gets injured, think about who the Phillies call up to replace Bryce Harper. He's not even close to Bryce Harper. And that's the difference when you say just, call up the next level, the next 200 play. If you take away the top 200 players and bring up the next 200 players, you are getting a far inferior product. So understand that these are the best players in the world at their sport and the top of their profession, which brings in revenues of hundreds of millions. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So these top players are going to earn their share of it. Besides that point, besides like the Bryce Harpers and the Garrett Coles and the Manny Machados who are making big contracts, making big money, I will point out to you that not every baseball player when people say it's millionaires versus billionaires, I don't really care. Not every baseball player is a millionaire. Every owner is a billionaire. And when you think about the majority of, if you say there's a pretty significant percentage of players that makes the major league minimum, and the major league minimum is like 600 something thousand. You say, wow, that's great. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But what's it take to get there? Okay. You're drafted out of high school at 18 and go play in the minor leagues. You're making a couple of $1,000s a month for 5 months of baseball, only 5 months during the season. You might make $2,500 a month to play minor league baseball. the other 7 months out of the year, you are not getting paid, yet you are putting up expenses to train yourself to be the best player you can be and fulfill your obligations to that organization and eventually get paid yourself. But in the minor leagues, you get paid a couple of $1,000s a month for just that portion of the summer that you're actually playing. Then when you get to the major leagues, okay, you get $500,000-600,000, but only as long as you're in the major leagues. If you're one of these guys that comes up and down, it's prorated portions. And again, you're putting a lot of time and money into your own training to be this good. Finally, if you've been in the big leagues for a few years and are really good, then you can get into these contracts that pay you $1 million or more. Take taxes out. It's not like you're sitting with millions in the bank and you are a millionaire.
Yes.
There is a difference between the class of player and the class of owner, and I think that's a significant factor in the way people, the average person, should think about it.
And you also, what I've understood from the negotiations is you're also now seeing the players' union, and this sort of gives me the idea that players who are making a lot of money would like to see players not making a lot of money make more money. They're trying to go to bat for players getting their minimum wage raised, and also some more money for the players in the minor leagues. Is that, do I have that correct?
Yeah, the minor leagues is a separate issue, and it's usually something that, actually in years past that the union is, part of the reason that the minor leaguers don't get paid very well sometimes is because they're not represented by the union, and it's always an easy way to give back something. It's an easy way for the owners to cut costs because that they're not represented by a union. The idea of there are players that are very well paid, but they usually have to work a very long time till they're close to 30 years of age before they're getting these big contracts. And part of the issue is when they're in their first year or two in the big leagues and they're still really good players, they're not getting paid like the best players in the sport. They don't get paid like the best players in the sport until they've accrued 6 major league seasons. And in those 6 seasons, you're putting up really good numbers to the point where you're going to get a big contract, but you're not getting it yet. And the models have changed. It didn't used to be as big a deal, but slowly teams have started to figure it out as you've gotten to more of an analytical and statistical mindset that a player ages 25 to 30 is obviously more valuable and capable of putting up peak performance than 30 to 35. But when the system is kind of rigged that a player can't become a free agent until he's close to age 30, in most cases, or over 30, then that big payday isn't coming. So the performance that you're putting up in your 20s isn't being compensated for at the rate that you would get in a free market, and that's kind of the idea of getting younger players paid more. Is the idea that, hey, when if Bryce Harper or Garrett Cole or Mike Trout or Manny Machado is one of the top 10 players in the game when he's only been in the league for a year, well, he should be paid like one of the top 10 players in the game at that point, not 6 years down the road. Yeah. And that's part of the more difficult conversations that they're having.
Talking like a guy like Juan Soto in Washington.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Whose payday is coming, but they've gotten him at low level salaries so far. And when Soto's a great example. When Soto has the first 2 years that he's had, and he's not into the arbitration process yet, the team can just pay him whatever the minimum salary is for that level of service, and that's not $30 million a year, even though there are guys who are getting paid $20 million who aren't as good as Juan Soto. And that's kind of where you're trying to kind of redistribute like that.
And that's when you put it like that, Sweeny, you see the unfairness, because we're talking about one of the 5, perhaps 2 best players in baseball, and they're getting him for bargain basement prices. It's wonderful to watch him. Yeah, it's wonderful to watch him play, and he often seems like he's ahead of the league. If you know that old saying, a person who's just standing out better, and he he certainly does. And that's the thing I think many people don't realize is here's a man. I don't know if he's gone public about his dissatisfactions, if he has them, but I mean, he could have easily won Most Valuable Player this year. Harper did in the National League and deserved it, but Soto could have. He had a great year.
Yeah, and I think it was, but Soto's like the rare top of the class there. So he's going to be kind of an exception. And when Juan Soto gets whatever record contract he's going to get, people are going to wonder what this whole work stoppage is all about. But it's about the idea of getting paid for what you're producing at that particular time. Because and Soto's the exception here because he's gonna, he got to the big leagues at a young age. He's the prodigy, right? So he's like Ken Griffey Jr., where you're gonna get to that big money when you're 25, not when or Harper, or when you're 25 or 26, not when you're 32. And when nowadays when you get to 31 or 32, teams are saying, you know what, you're really not worth the investment, and that's why they're trying to get the guys paid earlier.
What's this deal about a pool now also that has been back and forth? That's kind of leaving me wondering. I guess the idea is to take the statistics of players that are not arbitration eligible and figure out if they played well, they get a little extra money. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the whole formulas about it yet, but that's kind of how that's supposed to work, is to get these guys who aren't eligible yet. But, let's say, Mike, again, you got to take these numbers in perspective when you're talking about minimums, because it's not, it's hard for a regular working person to understand, but it's with respect to within the industry and what kind of revenues that are being generated. But if, Juan Soto made the major league minimum and almost won MVP, well, there's going to be some money for him in that pool that will be valued more than the, say, $30,000 raise he would get by being a second-year big leaguer rather than a first-year big leaguer. And so that's where that pool comes in. And there's some disagreement on how much money is supposed to be in that pool to be divided up, and that's things they're going to fight over too.
I'm going to make the very obvious comment that overlaid on this, Sweeny, as you can appreciate very well, I'm sure, we're talking about a game that is really hard to play at this level. I mean, these guys make it look easy, but they have talents and skills that really nobody else has. And that's why it looks easy in their hands. I mean, even trying to field a ground ball it goes against everything that you're built to do, and
like I said, it's not a kid's game. It's like saying that, pick whatever movie you want to pick, like that's not a sixth grade school play. Okay.
Yeah.
That's, these are actors, and this is their job, and they are the peak of their profession. And when you're talking about some great movie or some great TV show, it's not, they're not doing a kid's play. And Major League Baseball players are not playing a kid's game.
Hi, everyone. He's John Timpane.
And he's Don Rooney. And this is another soothing musical Innertube.
Each week on the Musical Innertube, we talk with interesting people about interesting things.
And we know each and every one of you, the Musical Innertube listeners, are just as interesting.
We'd like to hear from you. Just send an email to musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Or follow us on Twitter at @Innertube, capitalize the M and I.
And then tweet away at us.
You can just check in and say, hi, I'm listening.
You can tell us what you like or don't like about the Musical Innertube.
And if you'd like, you can tell us a little about your own interesting selves.
Perhaps we might share some of your messages on a future Musical Innertube.
Just send those emails to musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Or send us a tweet at @Innertube, capitalize the M and I.
We promise to read each and every one of them.
Just as soon as we learn how to read. When we talk about the performance aspect of it, how exactly, I guess it's just all measured by statistics. I know that they wanted to go with this statistic that I still haven't gotten my head around, which is WAR, wins against replacement. So how exactly are we going to determine who's a better player? Just, I guess, eyeball it? Or are the statistics going to kind of solidify that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of still to be determined. You're right. Like WAR is not a perfect metric. It's designed to give you a general feel in comparison, but then and it's been used to say, you used to have emotional buying and say like, this, and this player is attractive for whatever reason because of and these statistics, or he's been well known, and you remember this. And, you go back to like Moneyball, the A's basically said, well, if you add this player who isn't as famous and costs less, and this player who isn't as famous and costs less, and put them both together, it equals this person who we can't afford. And, like one of these guys is right-handed, one of these guys is left-handed. We're going to have a platoon of first base that when you put them together, it's going to be pretty close to what the production we could have gotten from this other guy. And that's kind of how WAR is looked at, but WAR is an imperfect metric. There are some flaws to it, and the idea that they don't want it to be the players don't want that to be the determining factor in how they get paid. And it can be used against you. Plus, there's other things like, because I'll give you an example. It should be for the same reason that people used to say, well, they should just be paid for incentives. Paid by incentives. Well, no, because then everyone's going to be trying. I know it sounds silly because they do that now, but everyone's going to try to hit a home run because that's what's going to get them paid, right?
Right.
You're going to be trying to do the things that get you paid, not the things that let you win a ball game. And WAR is, if you pay them by WAR, well, you're kind of asking for the same thing because, like, I want you to ground ball to the right side because that's going to help me win a game. Yeah, but that's not going to help me get paid. It's going to decrease my WAR. Sorry, I can't do it. So,
but isn't it true, Sweeny, that I think something you said, made me think about it, that players are aware of these new statistics and are playing to them. For example, that's one of the reasons that arguably batting average has decreased in estimation, is that what we want are home runs and ribbies.
Well, it's a reaction to like batting average is decreased for a number of reasons. Guys are throwing harder and striking more guys out. Plus, sure, defenses are better positioned. Basically, the idea is ground balls are turned to outs more frequently than they used to be. They don't get through the infield as much. Players are remember a ground ball up the middle?
Yep.
It used to be a single, right? Well, now there's a guy standing there. And he's sitting there because they've studied it and they know that this batter hits the ball here 60% of the time. So why shouldn't I stand there? Why should I stand a little over here and let the ball go up the middle for a hit when I know he's just going to hit it right to me if I stand right here?
I know also that with pitchers, the won-loss record doesn't matter much anymore as much as ERA.
Yeah, well, it's because there's too many different factors. There's too many things out of a pitcher's control. You could have a 4 ERA and have a good offense that gets you a lot of wins, and the a win is not valuable as much when you consider how it can happen. Right, a guy happens to be pitching in the 6th inning when your team scores 7 runs and you win the game. Okay, that's
a win.
That's a win. But there's still, like, I've had this discussion with Mike Messina, Hall of Fame pitcher for the Orioles and the Yankees. Like, there's still something valuable about doing it often, right? Like, a guy can cherry pick a win, but it's kind of hard to cherry pick 20 wins in a season. And it's hard to cherry pick 270 the way Mike Messina did, or 250 or 300. So over the accumulation of time, a lot of wins still has value and meaning. And as he pointed out to me not too long ago, last I checked, the standings are based on wins, not WAR.
Right?
You get to go to the World Series because you have more wins than the other team, not because you have a higher WAR than the other team.
What do you think will solve this problem? What do you think is going to eventually come to a compromise that everybody agrees with, and we get baseball again?
Just a deadline, and I think. there are lots of things here. The minimum pay we've talked about, the luxury tax thresholds. I know we've talked about in the past, like what that the impact that has. And the union it's basically it acts like a salary cap to some teams, and the union doesn't want that, and a lot of good reasons behind it. Somebody's just going to have to blink and budge. The biggest thing here is that the union is going to have to get some gains. They won't get all of them. They lost a lot in the last couple of CBAs. It's mostly their own fault for seeing it play out that way, and they're now in a situation where they lost too many battles over the course of two previous negotiations or three previous negotiations, and they want to get all of them back. They're not going to get all of them back, but if they get a few of them back and work towards the next one, then they're going to be able to say, okay, we need to get a deal in play.
The state of play is. A lot of it is the union's fault. Is that in allowing certain things to go away in former negotiations? Have they given up certain things?
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly. And just that, like, the owners are playing within this framework, and it's just evolved. I shouldn't even say fault, but I think people around the players feel that they gave away too many things in previous negotiations, and as technology evolved and forward thinking in the game evolved, owners used all this stuff to their advantage, to their benefit, and to keep salaries down. And that's really the whole thing that they're trying to avoid is the suppression of salaries. And I always just think it's kind of funny in that, the players play in a free market where they are trying to get the most money they can. The owners are playing in more of a socialist economy because they all need each other. They're in a collective, they're playing in a co-op. And the players are not. The Yankees, I've used this example, and forgive me if I've used it with you. Listen, if McDonald's could put Burger King out of business tomorrow, they would. But the Yankees' goal isn't to put Tampa Bay out of business. They need the games on the field. Nobody's showing up to watch practices. You need 30 teams. So trying to get 30 teams to survive without giving them too much of your money and helping them, beat you with it, these are the battles that the owners have to fight with themselves.
Well, one of the other things that this lockout is preventing is the free agent frenzy that we usually see close to spring training. How is that going to work out when the lockout is over and this flood of free agents is available again? I know in the last few years, free agents haven't done as well as they've done in the past.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know how to predict it, but it's going to be pretty spectacular in the flood of information. If you're somebody who likes to watch the 6 o'clock news still or read the morning paper, maybe you won't notice it that much. But if you're going to be the person who is on social media and hits refresh, you're going to see a flurry of activity because there are hundreds of free agents and teams have to make dozens of trades and lots of things in order to get their roster set in a very short period of time. I mean, we're just talking about right now. Let's just say, we talked about the March 1st deadline. Well, okay, let's say there's a deal struck in a week, okay? That leaves you a week till spring training. You know how much movement has to happen in order to get players signed into their teams? It's just a really big undertaking, and you don't have months to put it together. You've got days to put it together. So yeah, I would suggest, getting on Twitter and hitting refresh every 30 seconds or every 10 seconds. That's probably what I'm going to be doing, spending my days doing once the lockout is settled.
Do you think there are a lot of pending deals that are just waiting for the deadline to happen?
You haven't been able to discuss business. I mean, you're not making overtures to free agents and sending contract proposals back and forth. That's not happening. Are there some back channel things that people are maybe holding quietly and maybe talking about some trades? I don't think they can subpoena cell phone records from Major League Baseball executives, so who knows? But there are most of the business that is going to be had is not being talked about.
That's such a great description. In fact, it's a great description of many owner union negotiations in our country. where, there is an obvious, issue to be discussed, and it's the last thing that ever gets on the table.
They're going to, whenever there's a green light at some point here, you're going to see a jailbreak. It is, people think free agency in the NBA and the NFL is really cool because a lot of stuff happens in a short period of time. Well, the reason is they're both salary cap leagues, and if you don't get your money now, it's gone, right? So you've got to sign. You've got to sign today because somebody else is going to sign tomorrow, and maybe you don't have enough money left, or that there's not enough jobs left, or whatever it is. But I think what you're looking for is, you're going to be looking at a frenzy like that, and probably even beyond that. And there are other issues. You have players in foreign countries right now who have to apply for visas to enter the country to start spring training. That's not, they don't work on a 24-hour schedule. That there's a process to that. There are injured players that have been rehabbing on their own because the teams have not been able to contact them since December 1st. Maybe on November 30th, they handed out, here's what we'd like you to do as long as this lockout happens. But now you're talking about 2.5 months in which they haven't been able to check the progress of their injured players. Did they heal? Did they re-injure themselves? Are there other players who have injured themselves in the meantime and you don't know about it, and you only have a month of spring training to get your team together? A lot of things that are going to be part of this discussion here.
Now, I've also seen some indications or some talk, which probably is about as valuable as that is ever, that because it's an owner's lockout, the owners could lift the lockout even if a CBA isn't in place just to get things moving. But that doesn't seem very likely, does it?
No, I don't think so. It would, well, especially now, because if they were going to lift it, say today, what was the point? If they're going to lift the lockout, it's going to be under a great deal of force and strain, and probably to the point where you're missing regular season games. I don't think there was much point to it otherwise.
It would be so terrible if, after all, the longest football season in history, 18 games, and then a long sort of pushback, playoff of football. I'm not complaining about football per se. I'm just saying, if you love baseball, and I know all three of us do, if we lose all of the season for some reason, I hope it doesn't happen, it would be just lousy. I'll just say that.
Yeah, there's no other way to say it, right? There's going to be baseball again, but it's just going to be up to teams, and players are going to have to suck it up because there's going to be some backlash, there's going to be some hatred, and it's going to be there.
What about the quality of play? What do you think we've got going? We've had many teams have had troubles with their farm systems not being up to snuff. And you're right, when they call up somebody to replace an injured player, it's a big dip in quality. Also, there's a lot more teams, a lot more parity. And I've even heard talks of tanking, that some teams went out and specifically didn't do well so that they could get a better position in a draft. What do you think about that?
Of course they did. It's pretty obvious, and their teams didn't hide it, and it made sense from a business standpoint in this regard. Let's say you're the Baltimore Orioles, all right, and I don't know their exact payroll numbers, but let's just say for argument's sake, what if the Orioles decided they wanted to spend $150 million, and it's still $60-70 million short of what the Yankees and the Red Sox are spending, and they're going to finish at third place at best, and probably fourth because Tampa Bay is good too. Why should I spend $150 million? Why don't I just spend $50 million
right,
and pocket the rest? Well, the problem with that is it's competitive integrity. You're not trying to put your best team on the field and trying to win games. The players in the field are always trying to win. They're always trying to do their best. There are teams who are refusing to put the best players on the field. And that is, competitive balance isn't a thing. I mean, there's just plenty of competitive balance. Go look at the teams who have made the World Series over the last 20 years and how many different teams have made the World Series in the last 20 years compared to how many different teams have been in the Super Bowl or been in the NBA Finals. I mean, there's no comparison. There's plenty of competitive balance. Plenty of teams have had a chance. But the competitive integrity is a different aspect. You have teams that are not trying to put their best team on the field. There are teams who are choosing not to sign free agents because they would rather put a rookie and save the millions of dollars because they're not trying to win games. They're not trying to win enough games. Now, you say, okay, the guys in the field, they try to play. That's what we're putting on the field. But there are teams who are using it as a business strategy as opposed to a competitive strategy, and that's a big issue.
I think this has been a tremendous and sobering discussion. I certainly wish for baseball this year. I hope everybody straightens out the contract stuff and we can watch our beloved sport. Thank you, Sweeny, for a very enlightening discussion.
You got it, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot, Sweeny. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
You can get in touch with us by email. We're at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
You can also follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @MInnertube. Capitalize the M and I.
Our webpage is Musical Innertube. That's musical spelled with 2 A's, .libsyn, that's spelled LIBSYN.com.
The Innertube is available on Amazon Music, Audible, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio Podcasts, and anywhere that you get your podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.